Hi, I am Jamie O'Connor, and you're listening to the Inspired Focus podcast. My guest today has been a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, a fellow colleague, somebody that I am so glad that I've been on this journey with. And he is doing some really amazing things. It's fun for me to see where he's going because we had so many conversations over the years of our mutual desires to do something a little bit different than what we were doing. And I'm doing that, and he is kind of on that same ride in his own trajectory. And it's pretty amazing while also keeping the successful agency that he had when we met in the first place. And the steps ahead of me that he was were always such a saving grace when I was in my hardest moments. So I'm excited for Jason to share his story today, to tell you guys about how he got to where he is and what are the meaningful reasons for what he's doing today. Jason Portnoy has JPort Media as well as the Market Domination Method, and you may have listened to his podcast, Perfectly Mentored. And if you haven't, you definitely need to check that out. Jason, welcome to this show. Thank you for being a friend, a cheerleader, and I am so excited for my listeners to get to know you a little
So happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Jamie.
bit. Yeah, for sure. So I just want to start kind of where we left off, I think, with what we were talking about before we got on, which was basically catching up as old friends in what we've both been up to over the last year and a half or so, maybe a little longer since I last saw you in person, where you were launching the Market Domination Method and really coming to this place of serving people in the way you've kind of always wanted to. It's amazing to watch from the outside. So I'm excited to hear about how it's been on the inside.
Yeah, no, it's been a fun journey. You know this because we've spoken. I've always loved the consulting side, and as an agency owner, you can only help so many people, right? And sometimes the way you position yourself, you can only help people who can actually afford to hire you to do those things, and sometimes those fees aren't
It's true.
they're not cheap. Let's put it that way. And so, I thought of a way, with all the people that I've spoken to, all the different business owners, they all have the same problems. And the reason why they're not qualified to work with an agency, or the reason why they've been burnt by the agencies before, aside from just really bad agencies out there, it's because they don't know the basic fundamentals on how to run and grow a business. And if you don't know those things, you're going to have a tough time. And a lot of people got lucky during the COVID era. It's a weird thing to say, lucky during a pandemic, but they got lucky because e-commerce boomed like 10 years and they rode that wave. And then all of a sudden things kind of got back to normal. And, what's the expression, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. And that's kind of what we had. So they got by on just external circumstances working in their favor, and now external circumstances don't work in their favor, and they don't know what to do. And now all of a sudden, you actually need to know how to run a business. So seeing all that, I was like, hey, I'm just going to help people do that. And I'm going to do it in a consulting way. I'm going to do it in a group coaching way. I'll give them access to all my resources. I'll bring them in. It's everything that I would do as an agency, but not the work for you. So I'll hold your hand. I'll tell you what you need to hear. We'll go through a lot of different things. Then I started going on my own journey through all that, right? Because that's the coaching era. And I launched this, and it was pretty much based off the premise of, you know, I don't want to bore your listeners, but math, like compounding, you just have to get incrementally better. But that's a different conversation. But when I started the program, and then I went on my first family vacation in 4 years. So it's my first vacation in 4 years. I've traveled a lot, but it's always been for work. My first vacation where I've disconnected, was purely with the family. And then the second to last day, just something clicked, like everything clicked. And it was like, this is what it's all about. This is it, right? Like when you're searching and you're building and you're constantly trying to grow a business, you're doing it and you're trying to figure out what's it for, money, this. And it was always, what's your why, what everything. And I never understood. It was just like, make money and let's go. And I'll figure everything else out later. And then it just like clicked. I was like, I could do this all day. I just want to do this. I want to create these moments. And it really came to like the thing that stuck into my mind is how do you build a business but optimize for happiness? How do
Love
you
that.
how do you have that? How do you grow? Because you and everyone in life is saying no, you can't have both. You got to pick. When you're growing businesses and you're in scale mode, you got to go through it. Things have to be sacrificed. But what I always found was
Yep.
everyone who was sacrificing, what they were sacrificing were the things that they wanted later on. So they were sacrificing the
Mm-hmm.
things they have now in order to enjoy them later on, which made absolutely no sense to me. And I was like, well, I disagree. And I think the world
Mm-hmm.
would be better if more people just stood up and said, I disagree with that, and say, I don't care what box you paint or what the gurus are saying. I think you could have both. And I think I can build an amazing, thriving business and live life to my dreams without sacrificing the things that matter most. And I came back and I'm like, boom, started going through mindset stuff, started going through quantum, started going through a lot of different things down the rabbit hole. And it was like, I wish I spent so much money on coaching on how to get better at marketing, how to get better at business. I wish I would have done the mindset stuff earlier on. But that's what happens, right? I usually get to a level of success and you realize that the game is 99% internal, and the stuff that you've avoided are the things you probably need the most in the beginning.
Yep.
And so that's I came back and switched the whole direction of the program, and it was like, cool, I'm gonna help business owners, like I said, build their business and optimize for happiness. And I call it like we based like I made a model which is called the M3 model, which is pretty much how do you get more freedom of money? Because the truth is you do need money. How do you get freedom of moments, like your time back? And how do you have like peace of mind? Those are the three M's, right? Mind, money, and moments. And how do you build a business around that? Because success is an is a made up word. It's whatever it means to you, right? So no, if you think, hey, I just want to make $50,000 a year and I get to live here and do this and I'm successful, then don't listen to anyone else. Do that.
Yep.
So I mean, that's a kind of a little rant on how we got there, but that's pretty much what the past year has brought me to. So
I wouldn't call it a rant. I would call it a mic drop personally. But this is why I love you. And this is why I'm so glad that I got to hear that story for the first time recording on this podcast, because in a big way, we followed a really similar journey. And I love it. And I love where you got to and how you're helping people in that way and how important that is. I mean, I remember I had somebody, I don't know if you know Ben McClellan.
yeah, of course.
Okay, so I worked with Ben, and I remember hiring him to help me with the back end fulfillment operations in the agency. And he did, whatever time frame it was to see what was going on and what he could help with and all of that. And then he wrote me and he said, okay, I've met with everyone. I've looked in the back end of your systems and I know what's wrong. Let's meet. And so we met, and he was like, so the problem is you. And I had spent so much money and so much time making sure I had all the ops right to like put out all the fires and not have to do it and make sure my team was good. And yet my issues, my mindset issues, my control issues were what were keeping me exactly where we were and keeping me exactly in every single fire in everyone's business, rather than letting them actually do the job that we had the operations that were set up for them to do. And it totally changed my trajectory because I listened and I allowed him, rather than spending time in my company and my team, I allowed us to pivot and work on my mindset for, our contract time, whatever length that was. And I started having those moments. I started having moments where I was like, oh, this is what I actually was doing all of this for. And this is where I want to be. And then I realized I actually hated the marketing enough that I didn't want to even be on my couple hours a week of meetings that I still had to be on, and made my pivot to like go fully into this mindset and performance route. And I love what you're doing because so many reasons. One, you've been able to keep the agency in your world for the moment, whatever that might look like in the future. Who knows? I hope amazing for you, whatever that is. And you've gotten to take your background of building a really successful clothing brand and having mentors that, I mean, most people would salivate at if we're being honest. Building a successful agency and taking all of that golden thread into serving other people in a way that really fulfills you. That's amazing.
I appreciate that. And look, I know what it's like to walk away from business. I walked away from the clothing business because I was
Yeah,
unhappy.
totally.
But I didn't know, like you could look back and be like, oh, these are the reasons why.
Yeah,
Um,
here's the thread.
but at the time I wish I could say it was because happiness, like I believed that happiness mattered most. I was just miserable and I loved something else. But I know how hard it is to walk away from something. So, kudos to you because you kind of made that pivot too. And you said your happiness matters most, and realizing, look, it is entirely you. And now that I'm coming from this mind, I'm actually helping way more people than I ever did before because I went in from a business first perspective. But the truth is, if you have most business owners don't know what they want, and they'll answer the question with what they want with what they don't want. Well, I don't want to work this hours, and I don't want to, and I don't want to be stressed out about money or anxious. Well, great, you're listing things you don't want, but I asked the question of what do you want, and they don't know. And you could get so far without knowing, but if you don't know what you want, and I would say most importantly, why you want that, because you could sit there and say, I want to have $1 billion company, but if you don't know why you want $1 billion company, then it's all going to fall apart anyways. So if you
So
don't
true.
know what you want and why you want it, well, guess what? You won't know what you're supposed to pay in order to get that. And
Yeah.
you can't really make decisions. Like I always say, it's like Alice in Wonderland when Alice asked the cat, which the right direction. And the cat said, well, which way do you want to go? And she said, I really don't care. And the cat said, well, it doesn't matter which way you go then. So
Yep.
it's almost the same thing. Like, what do you want? Oh, I don't know. Well, then doesn't matter what you do then. Don't run ads, don't run ads. Do this, don't do this. Well, all be the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And to what end are we doing the things we're doing? Like you talked about continuing to stick it out. And a lot of people do this. I think you and I both did this too. I have a story about not going skiing, even though I, was blocked from the ski lift, and my husband coming home every day being like, you make your own schedule. What are you doing?
Yep.
And to what end? And when it's exactly what you're saying, when you don't know to what end, you're either going to work yourself to the bone and burn down the ships, or it's like something in your energetic circle is not going to allow you to get there.
I mean, you nailed it, right? Like, how many of us like sacrifice something because we're told you need to sacrifice it in order to get it? We're told you can't go on that ski trip. We're told, hey, you got to spend time away from the family. You're building a business. That's what it takes. Now, don't get me wrong. If someone came to me and said, I want to build $1 billion business, I want to grow to $1 billion. Well, guess what? You're going to sacrifice a lot more of those family moments than someone who wants to build $1 million business. But if that's what you're put on earth to do and call it, well, guess what? You know the price you're willing to pay for it. But if I'm not missing family time is a non-negotiable to you, well, then you build a business around that. And it may not be $1 billion business. It may be, but maybe you're going to have to sacrifice some things in order to get there. But at least you have that end result in mind. You know what you want. But so many people are sacrificing things for no reason because they don't know what they want. And they don't believe they could have both. And they have no clue what number is really going to make them happy because they haven't done the math. They haven't looked at it. They haven't broken it down. They have no clue what they want. They have no clue what the real problems are in life. They have no clue. Like, I did this exercise. I'll be really candid. I did this exercise. So a mentor of mine gave me this exercise. Said, if I gave you 10 tickets to solve any problem that you have in your life, right? 10 tickets solves any problem, big or small. What would they be? And I'm going through that exercise and I'm like, okay, there's certain big problems that, like necessarily don't affect me, but health of other people, whatever that I'd want solved. But get to number 3. And now I'm like petty. I'm like, oh yeah, we could have a bigger backyard. Like we could have but that's the truth. Like most people don't realize just how lucky they are and how blessed they are and that life is work. And we all think you have problems, And some people have major problems. I'm not discounting that, but perspective in life is so important when you look at things. And when you're actually given a task to hand in 10 problems, you're almost like embarrassed by some of those problems. So yeah, I mean, that's it's crazy when you actually just figure out, like, you don't have to give up anything, and we don't have to make things into big issues.
I love that task. And two, that is such an important point because the other piece is to make decisions that get you closer and into closer synchronicity to the things you really want. You have to know the things that really actually aren't that important that you've been putting on the mountaintop, that you've been pedestaling, to know actually that doesn't matter. And sometimes that's things like what your mom thinks.
Hmm.
Sometimes that's things like what other people are going to think of you if you decide to do this thing.
Yep.
Because if you don't have an understanding of like, oh, these are the problems I have, but it's actually really, really petty and it doesn't really matter for the things that I really want to be doing, you allow those things to hold so much weight in your mind that it keeps you from making the decisions that get you closer to the things you actually really, really want.
You just got to know what you want, though.
Yes, and you have to know what you
it,
want.
it,
And
it,
so
it all it all starts
often,
it all starts there, and then you could tune out the noise. But
yeah,
we go down the noise of, like, what will my mom think? Why does this person on social media have more than me? Why does this happen? Like, you're doing that because you're comparing, and you're living like, you're living someone else's life, right? And
yeah,
you're living in,
then your own.
like, there's a great book, like, I'm sure you read it, The Gap and the Gain. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
the gap and the gain, are you living? So that's Benjamin Hardy. He's a doctor. He talked about it. It's like, are you living your life in the gap or in the gain? And living it in the gap means you're judging yourself based off where you are now compared to an ideal version on the horizon. But the weird thing is, you can never catch the horizon.
Right.
So it's a bad place to judge yourself on an ideal version of what you want. Like, oh, I'm here, but I want to be $1 billion company. So now I'm miserable because I'm only doing $100,000 a year, but I should be doing $1 billion. And that's when you start sinking in. You have all these feelings and anxious feelings and stress and burnout and whatever. But if you're living in the gain, you're looking back and you're looking at moments, right? And to the point where, like, yes, this matters in business, but I took it to, like, my kids. Like, I want my son to, like, sleep through the night and be fully body trained, and I'm like, dude, you did 2 nights. Why can't we do three? Because on the third night he had an accident, and it's like, why can't you do three? And I could live in this ideal version of, like, where I want him to be, or I could sit there and say, hey, a week ago you still needed to sleep in your pull-ups, right? But now you're doing
Yeah.
2 nights, and celebrate
Yeah.
that. And I think that makes me better at going through it with him, versus coming from a place of, like, easy, dude, relax on him for a second. Look at the progress he's
Mm-hmm.
making versus there. And I think that translates to business, translates to your own life, it translates to your own business. I think it's just a really good way of looking at things.
I love the analogy, including your son. And it's something I talk about on the podcast a lot, that these lessons that, well, first of all, I believe that being an entrepreneur is one of the greatest, like, spiritual pressure cookers you could possibly experience, because we have stripped away the sense of safety that society tells us that we're supposed to have, and we have to create it for ourselves. So that's like level one. And then you go down to all of these other things. And every single lesson we learn has such major factor in every other part of our life, and can be utilized if we actually take it, if we actually learn it and take it into those other parts of our lives, and vice versa. Like, when I've learned about conscious parenting, a lot of those tools I can use with clients. I mean, it's amazing because it's a central core theme of what is it to be a good human being that is being fulfilled from from the inside out. And so how do we teach our children that, and then also be learning how to do that ourselves.
Agreed. Nothing to add to that. That's perfect.
I mean,
Just agreed.
I love it. Good. I'm so glad. In what you just said before, one of the things I've talked about is in the gap section. One of the things that happens a lot is that we move the goalposts. So we attain the goalposts. I know this is what happened to me. I talk about it a lot, that I created my vision board life. I had on that vision board when I started the agency, making over 6 figures a year and having a van and having things that made me feel like I was going to have that sense of freedom. And I had all of it. And I was miserable. And I was moving the goalposts, because then I wasn't being grateful for the gain the way that you just described so beautifully and the gap in the gain talks about. And I was recognizing that it was freedom from the inside out that I was missing, and I hadn't actually done the deep work. I think some people get to that point where they're like, oh, it's not that I need to set another goalpost. I need to figure out how that feeling exists without a goalpost. And some people, that's the moment they recognize it, is, oh my gosh, I'm hitting deep despair and I have everything I've ever wanted. And there's a lot of shame and there's a lot of things that happen around that.
Yeah. I think moving goalposts is natural, right? When we start achieving success and start achieving some of the goals, well, then if we achieved it all, then
you have to move the goalposts.
Then you have to move the goalposts. So goalposts
Totally
have to move, but it goes back to even what I said at the beginning of like, why do you want those things? Mm-hmm. So first knowing what, and then understanding why, then you're able to go after those things with full clarity. But And if you're having an honest conversation, there are times where I have an honest conversation. I'm like, and I ask myself a question. I'm like, does this make me happy, or does this make me look in a certain way that will get me some sort of recognition or status or whatever it is? And I'm very real about that. Like I'm a pretty self-aware person, and I know all these things, and even I'm susceptible to these things where I'm like, I want this. Is this going to make me happy, or do I think that other people are going to view me as this if I get that, and that's what's going to make me happy? And if the answer is even close, if I have to even think about it for longer than a second, I don't do it because I already know the answer. That I'm doing it for the perception versus doing it for myself. So I think when you know what you want and why you want it, you're able to make decisions with a lot more clarity, and goalposts can move as long as you're realistic and you're not chasing that horizon, right? Because you're never going to catch the horizon. But if you feel like you have room to grow, like the worst is someone who stays stagnant. Like I feel so bad for that person who's comfortable. Comfortable is such a bad place to be, especially as an entrepreneur. Yes. And I would argue even in life, like I'm comfortable until you're not. And then you're going to wish that you did something. And then by then it's too late. And the changes you're going to have to make are drastic, and that leads to anxiety, and that leads to stress, and that leads to a lot of depression, a lot of different things, versus how do I keep finding ways to get out of my comfort zone? How do I find ways to keep moving and move the needle forward? And that could be professionally, that could be personally, that could be anything. But if you're staying stagnant, it's literally the worst place to be. And someone with a goal who's just like, this is the goal, I hit it and I'm done and I'm comfortable. Well, I'm sorry for you, I guess. I'm sorry. I'm happy you reached your goal, but if you have nothing else further to accomplish, then that's sad, right? Like it's a sad life.
Yeah. And there's a delicate balance of celebrating and embodying what you gained, being really grateful for it, and then moving the goalpost versus constantly like moving the goalpost, looking at the horizon.
I mean,
that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going.
Yeah, but it's not just gratitude for what you have. I mean, if you study quantum and you learn anything, it's gratitude for what you want as if you already have it.
Mm-hmm.
right? So if I feel grateful for something that I want, as if I have it right now, that puts me in a state of mind that I'm eventually going to have it. We could go down the rabbit hole of quantum if you want, but that's
Oh,
that's
we could totally do that.
that's kind of how it works. And it sounds very woo. And trust me, I'm the least woo type person out there. It took me like like 41 years to get into and think of mindset, but it's the truth. And so gratitude is like just grateful for what you have, um, and also grateful for what you're about to have, as if you already have it. And if you could just be happy, if you could just learn to
Mm-hmm.
what makes you happy and do that, then it becomes easy. And this sounds so weird because I teach business owners how to build businesses, but if but so many times the business owner comes to me and they want to achieve a certain metric, or they want to achieve a certain level of their goal, or a level in business that they want to reach, and I ask them why and they don't know, then we're going to have this talk, because it doesn't really matter what we do, right? So this is so important. You cannot grow your business. You can maybe get by a little bit. You can maybe get to certain, but you cannot grow your business unless you're absolute with full clarity of what you want and what you want and what you want to do. And you look back at any times where you're like, man, my business just wasn't growing as fast as I wanted it to be, or this is that. You didn't even know what you want. Like I look back and I'm like, I could have grown this big agency. Why didn't I grow this big agency? Because I toyed with, I want it, I don't want it, I want it, I don't want it, I want it, I don't want it. And if you keep changing your mind, well, guess what? You can't really make a decision if your mind changes every week. So if you have full clarity, you could go in and be like, okay, now I know what the steps are. I could reverse engineer from there.
Mm-hmm.
And if it either falls into it or not, this
Mm-hmm.
podcast, me coming on here, is either a good use of my time or a bad use of my time. Forget if you were a friend or not. Forget anything like that. But like you start saying yes or no to things based off, does this move the needle forward or not? And that's where clarity comes in. And that's where just absolute understanding. I don't even know how we got down this road. I think we started with gratitude and now we're at clarity. But yeah, yeah, I think you
Well,
get,
I
I think
think
you
they're
get the point.
very aligned. Yes, they're very aligned though, as essentially we're talking about alignment. Because alignment brings you to a place of being deeply grateful for what you have and where you're going. Alignment brings you clarity on what to say yes to and what to say no to. Alignment brings you the ability to look at something and say, oh, I'm doing this thing and it's actually keeping me from what I really want. And so I'm going to let it go.
Hmm.
When you don't have that, then it's really easy to get sucked into behaviors, tasks, patterns that you have some other underlying unconscious reason to be doing that's serving you in a different way, and hold on to those because you don't actually like have the thing that says, no, that's actually keeping me from what I really want because I know what I really want, and therefore I'm going to let that go
Spot
and
on.
move on from it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can speak to it just like you can because we went through it. Like we went through this journey. I think I remember sitting in a mastermind room with you where you were like, mindset. I don't know, but that was a good like 6 years ago. So things
Honestly, that could have
change.
been a year ago too. I was like that, but yeah.
And so one of the things not to go too far down the quantum rabbit hole because it's a long, potentially infinite one, maybe. Um, One of the things I found in that before I really understood and how it played out in my life, like I can look back and see all of the times where it was playing out in my life, positive or negative, without me realizing it. And now I have a better grasp of what that looks like. It's really easy to hear these things about gratitude and to hear Abraham Hicks talk or whoever it is that you're following in the mindset world and talk about gratitude and actually be having gratitude for the thing that you want, but not actually truly feeling it, like not being like really embodied, like I believe I have it the way you said, like you already have it. If you're doing it, if you're sitting there and you're writing gratitude lists about the things that you are going to have, but you're doing it because you don't have it, because you don't have it in your life yet and you're actually doing it from this mind frame of that, what I've noticed is it actually is like doing it from lack and almost like creating the same energy again and again and again, and then going into this place where you're like, why the fuck isn't this working? Why isn't it working? But it's because you're actually in this place of, I don't have it, so I'm going to use this tool. Just like if you try to use a framework in your business, but you don't actually like what you're doing in your business, it's not going to work. It's the same thing, right? You actually have to be like deeply grateful and deeply grateful for the potentiality of it and for everything you have right now. I have a teacher that says everything is perfect as it is, and so is my desire to. And like creating that vortex of deep gratitude, including the thing you actually are creating or wanting to have in all of the pieces.
I mean, like if you think about it, like all the gurus that you follow, that like the Gary Vaynerchuk's, they all say the same. They're saying the same
All of
thing,
them.
right? Like
Yeah.
fall in love with the journey, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
like play. I love like Gary when he says, "I love the game." That's what he's saying, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's it. All comes down to it's just different ways of saying it. Um, but yeah, if you're not happy along the way, like then something's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and it has more to do with than my business just isn't making money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. 100%. I can say for sure every time I've looked back on it, I can say it with the clients that I've worked with in the business before. And now that you've been working with people, it is, I think it's a vital conversation as part of being a business owner that not enough people are really having. So I think it's amazing that you're bringing that into how you're serving these businesses, because it's so easy to plop in framework in front of people and it'll work for 10% of them, but not actually have the deeper conversations.
Agreed. Agreed. Like just like that's why courses go unwatched or books go
Mm-hmm.
unread. It's like, and people that's the reason, right? Frameworks are great. Set a great foundation, but this game is 99% internal. If you can't get a handle on that, well, there's only so many frameworks.
So, what is there a next goalpost for you? Do you know yet what that looks like?
I mean, look, part of what I do is, and I've learned this from mentors of mine and coaches of mine, right? Like I have my routines, like my morning formula where I kind of go through it every single morning, and on there is what I want done by the end of this year, things I want done in 3 years, and things I want done and how I want my life to look in 10 years, and ideally like my most perfect like life, or like even Craig Ballantyne, when he was on the podcast, told me about this, like the perfect day. What does your perfect day look like? And that could be like 10 years in the future, whatever you want. What's the most perfect day? And I review that every single morning before I start. So yeah, those get adjusted, when I get closer, or obviously things change. I may have wanted this, but now I don't want this. I may have wanted a plane a month ago and I think a jet's useless now. Like I'll adapt it and change it. Um, but I have there's I have an end result, and those goalposts won't move because they're bigger than just certain metrics. They're the ideal life. It's this, and yes, as I get closer, maybe that will change a little bit, but they're so baked out. They're like 10+ years in the future, and then based off those goals, I bring it down to 3 years, and then based off that, I bring it down to a year, 6 months, and do it that way. And I reverse engineer backwards. So the goalposts don't move so often because my bigger vision doesn't change that often. And if my bigger vision is not changing that often, then reverse engineering, I know what I want based off how I want it to be 10 years out. And yes, obviously certain nuances change and certain things change with it. Um, but the goalposts don't move that much when you have a bigger vision in place.
Yeah, it's all about the vision, really. That is what it is. How often, when you're talking to clients, do you see that they actually have a really hard time owning the big vision that they really want. Like something inside them is telling them they can't actually have that. So they won't even own the big vision that they want, or it's hard for them to get there.
I was about to answer one way. I still have an answer, but it's the second part of that question that kind of threw it off. I think most people don't realize they're in their own way. So I would say the answer to that is 100% of the time, because they're in their way like the whole time, no matter what. But I would say from an agency side, let's look at agency side. Anytime I hear someone's been burnt before, or they've gone through 3 agencies, or they've gone through this, and they've been burnt, or whatever the story is, um, it's usually because they outsource the strategy to someone else. They outsource the vision of their business to someone else. And if you're going to outsource it to an agency, and I think we're a really fantastic agency, I think the best I'd put ourselves against anyone. I think we're very good. But if you're going to outsource the vision to us, we're not the business. So we're going to come up with our own metrics, and we're going to come up with all this. So that's where most businesses get burnt by agencies, is because they outsource that stuff, or they think they're delegating, but they're abdicating. And there's certain parts of your business you can never ever delegate. Like, I mean, eventually you can, but like the bigger vision has to come from somebody. It has to come from you. You're the business owner, and the most time you have to understand the marketing behind it. You have to know you have to know the numbers. Shouldn't be delegating the checkbook, right? Like there's certain things you should not be doing, or otherwise it's abdicating. And I think that's what they do. They come to us and they're like, hey, we didn't hit a 75,000x, return on ad spend. And I'm like, well, wherein that was the goal? Like, we have onboarding. Well, what's the goal? And a lot of times they're like, well, I don't know. You tell me what's achievable and what's not, what I should be expecting. You're the experts. I'm like, that doesn't work like that. What do you need? Like, what do you want? What do you need? Well, I don't know. Well, then guess what? We're going to have a tough time. Because if you don't know what you need, you're not going to be happy with anything we deliver to you. Right? What if we deliver a 15x return to you, but in your mind, you're like, man, I was really expecting a 95x. Doesn't mean we're going to go by your strategy. But once I hear your strategy, I could give you an expert opinion and an ethical response to that strategy, and sit there and say, hey, this is not realistic. These are unrealistic goals right now. Right? I get why you want that. Why do you want those things? And that's the next part. They'll give us a number. If they do know the number, they'll give it to us, and they won't understand why they want it. And they won't understand. So I said, okay, fine. So like, they want $1 million. I'm like, well, what if you still did 500,000, but you were more profitable? Oh yeah, I'd take that too. Well, there you go. You don't need $1 million. It's arbitrary numbers made up. So a lot of times they give me a number, it's made up. I push back now. And I tell everyone on my team to push back, even when they come into the coaching program, like, what do you want? Why? Why do you want that? Again, it goes back to why. Like, what do they want and why do they want it? And otherwise they're coming in and getting burnt because they're relying on me for strategy. And we've had conversation with people who are like, no, that honestly, that's not realistic. And they're like, well, that's what I need. I'm like, then if that's 100% what you need, and you won't listen to anything else, and you won't find a middle ground and let us work on strategy with you, and tell you what you could expect and what we see and what the roadmaps are, and are you okay with this? And we both sign off on a strategy. Well, you're signing on to a strategy. I'm not involved. I don't want to be part of that strategy. I'm not signing off on it. We might as well just part ways here.
Yes. And I honestly think when you zoom out, that is a problem, that it's a leadership problem that they have. It's a mindset problem. And what I've seen over and over now from the mindset and performance side is that desire for freedom is really confused with how to be a leader, right? So they're like, have this desire for freedom. So I'm going to hire internally team. I'm going to hire externally agencies, and I'm going to delegate because that's what I'm told I'm supposed to do. But they actually don't connect their vision back to all of that in the way we've been talking about. They abdicate exactly what you're saying.
But that's the important part. Because if you're a business owner and you want to do absolutely nothing, right? And you're like, hey, I just want to be the visionary. I don't want to work. I don't want to do anything. I just want to hire a salesperson. Your prerogative. I'm actually for that. I used to laugh and be like, good luck. Now I'm for that. You want to do that?
Totally.
Guess what? when you're a business owner and all employees who complain my boss does nothing, no, your boss does something and put the money in.
Mm-hmm.
It's their skin in the game. They have the prerogative to do whatever they want. They could go in the business. They don't have to. They could show up on a Tuesday at 4 p.m. and wave their hand and then leave. And you can sit there and say, what an awful boss. He goes in at 4 and leaves at 4:15. It's his choice. Guess what? When you're the owner and you put in the money and you put the risk and it's your name and your risk on and it's your chips on the table, you get to make the decisions like that. So I'm for that. The problem is it's not the delegating part. It's that they delegate without a vision or a strategy.
Yes.
And that was the second part to what you were saying. And that's why it's so important, because like you could delegate everything. If you have a vision and you're like, here's what I want, I'm on board. I don't want to do sales calls. I don't want to do this. I'm going to hire salespeople. And guess what? I'm going to invest the money and I'm going to grow this way faster than just me by myself. Good for
Amazing.
You have a vision. But if you're like, I don't know what makes sense. I don't know how much, what should I pay a salesperson? I don't know what my margins are. I don't even know how many times customers are coming back. I don't know any of these. Well, guess what? You should not be making those decisions, right? Because you don't know enough to make a real decision.
Yeah. You're not making the decision from the place of understanding how strategy fits within your vision, and that a vision that is actually solid and has bones to it. I talk a lot about we have to put the scaffolding up for the thing to be built beneath it. If you don't have the scaffolding, you have the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it doesn't actually work.
Yeah, but the Leaning Tower of Pisa will attract thousands and tens of thousands of people. You won't. Your business won't. Your business will just collapse.
Your business won't. Okay, so poor analogy. You have crumbling foundation that's gonna.
You have a house of cards, right? It's like
a house of cards is probably a better one.
One thing you do, like, it will knock the business over, and to me that doesn't sound fun, right?
No.
Like, I'm not interested in rebuilding my business 17 times in 1 year. I as well just, like you said, put in the work, build the foundation, pour the concrete, and guess what? When you're like the three little pigs, right? Build a house of sticks, a house of hay, or a house of bricks, right? I think those were the three things. Guess what? The ones that just tried to rush through it, they lost their house and got eaten by a wolf. The one that actually took the time and built the house of bricks withstood the storm. So,
and had a place to land and be in their freedom.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I feel like we could definitely continue talking and go down many rabbit holes together. As always, we've always had to cut off our calls before they feel totally complete, but that's what makes an amazing friendship. And I'm sure it won't be the last time that we get to talk on one of our podcasts, and obviously just in general. So I want to take this moment to just say thank you so much. What an incredible conversation. I hope that there's some people out there that have a business that can benefit from you and your work. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the type of businesses that mainly come in or that you ideally work with in either the agency or market domination method?
On the agency side, we're predominantly e-com. You got to be doing at least 25,000 a month in revenue for it to be worthwhile. Now you have to come with a budget that you're going to spend on there of over 10,000 a month alone on just Facebook ads at a minimum, I would say right now. But if that's not you yet, or you're from the coaching side, we've worked with plumbers, e-com owners, car dealerships. The premise is pretty simple. Like, as long as you're not a dirtbag, and as long as you're a good person, as long as you are coachable and willing to listen, and you don't have victim mentality where woe is me, everything bad happens to me, and at the same time you're not a blamer where it's like, oh, it's always someone else's fault. That means you're coachable and you're not wearing what I call the failure uniform, where it's like, hey, you come on and you, like, that's the failure uniform, and I could tell right away whether someone's going to win or fail based off those things. And you're ready to grow your business, and you want the help. I think that's the most important part. There's asking for help, and then there's being ready to accept the help. Then I think it's worth a call, because the call is a no-brainer, and let us demonstrate value to you. The same way with the agency is like you come on a call, it's up to us to demonstrate the value. It's not going to be like a sales call of like, imagine if your life was this, right? How would that make you feel? Cool. Well, we'll get you there. It's here's what we do. Let's plug it into your numbers. Let's plug it into your life and your business. And this is how we could get you there. And it's either we demonstrate enough value where you want to do business with us or don't. It's not even a sales call. I'll tell you right off the bat, you're gonna have to ask for the sale, right? Like at the end of that call, you're gonna have to like if you don't want to work with me, you could jump off the call, but you'll never hear me say so. Ready to sign? But yeah,
One of the reasons I love you, and we've always gotten along, similar philosophies on that, and I appreciate it so much. And I'm sure the people who work with you do as well. Um, any other things to add? And if not, where can people find you so that they can get more Jason in their life?
yeah. Jportnoy.com. I did a training also on this whole M3 model, which is marketdominationmethod.com/M, like Mary 3, the number 3. You could go there, watch the free training I did. And across social media, I'm at Jason Portnoy on almost everything. So easy findable and connectable with. But the last thing I'd add is, man, just so phenomenal watching your journey too, and just seeing how you've gone through your own journey, your life, in similar trajectories, different times, but pretty similar on how we view things, and just watching what you've accomplished has been incredible to see. So, super like humbled to be on this podcast and super grateful that you asked me to come on and share my journey. But I mean, I think your listeners should really understand that your journey has been remarkable.
No. Well, thank you. Very much received, and I really appreciate it. You've always been a friend and a cheerleader of mine, as I have yours. And I think that kind of mutual respect and reciprocity is well deserved. So thank you. Also, since you guys are probably on here on one of your favorite podcast platforms, Jason does have an amazing podcast, Perfectly Mentored. So go check that out as well. And if you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, please do on whatever platform that you are listening on right now. And go check it out on YouTube because we're there too.
And leave
Thank
a 5-star
so
review. And leave a
and leave a 5-star
review.
review. Thank you, Jason. I'm
Hey.
working on this end thing and all of those.
Unless
so
you thought
thank
this
you.
episode was crap, and then like don't leave any review. Just
And
like
then don't do anything.
Just don't. Yeah.
Perfect. Amazing. Yes, leave a 5-star review on all the apps, whatever you want to do. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Jason. This has been an incredible conversation. And I will see you all again soon.